January 15th, 1947. A mother is taking her young child for a morning walk through a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood. She spots something lying in a vacant lot just feet from the sidewalk. At first glance, she thinks it's a mannequin. But when she looks closer, she runs screaming for the nearest phone. What she found that morning would become the most infamous unsolved murder in American history. This is the story of the Black Dahlia. Who was Elizabeth Short? Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in Boston, Massachusetts. She spent her early years in New England and Florida before eventually relocating to California, where her father lived. She moved to Los Angeles in July 1946, working as a waitress while chasing her dream of becoming an actress. She lived in a rented room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Hollywood's bright lights had called her name, but the city would give her anything but the life she dreamed of. Short was rarely employed, moved frequently, and had known at least 50 men at the time of her death. She was young, drifting, and searching for something she never found. The discovery. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a mother taking her child for a walk stumbled upon a horrifying sight: the body of a young naked woman, sliced clean in half at the waist. The body was just a few feet from the sidewalk, posed in such a way that the woman reportedly thought it was a mannequin at first glance. But it was no mannequin. The 22-year-old had been sliced in two at the waist and completely drained of blood. Some of her organs had been removed and neatly placed underneath her body. Pieces of flesh had been cut away from her thighs and breasts. The most chilling detail, however, were the lacerations on her face. The killer had sliced each side from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating what is known as a Glasgow smile. Despite the extensive mutilation, there was not a single drop of blood at the scene, indicating she had been killed somewhere else entirely, then carefully transported and posed. The investigation. The FBI was called in to help and managed to identify the body in just 56 minutes using blurred fingerprints transmitted via an early fax machine from Los Angeles. The victim was Elizabeth Short. She was just 22 years old. Newspapers began calling her the Black Dahlia, partly inspired by the 1946 film noir The Blue Dahlia, and partly because of her striking dyed black hair and the black clothing she favored. At least 750 investigators from the LAPD and other police departments were put on the case. More than 60 people, including some women, confessed to the murder, especially after a $10,000 reward was posted. Then things got stranger. On January 24th, postal inspectors intercepted an envelope addressed to Los Angeles newspapers containing Short's address book and a note made from cut-out newspaper headlines reading, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." The Herald Express also received letters from the purported killer, one of which read, "I will give up on Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." The killer was taunting investigators and the entire city of Los Angeles. The suspects. 3 major theories have captivated investigators and researchers for decades. Suspect 1, Robert Red Manley. Manley was a married salesman and the last known person to see Elizabeth Short alive. He was arrested on January 19th but released a day later. He passed a lie detector test and was never charged. Suspect 2, Mark Hansen, a nightclub owner with whom Short had briefly stayed. His address book was among the effects mailed to the press. One author theorized that Hansen's motive was that Short had rejected his advances and knew too much about his illegal schemes. Suspect 3, George Hodel. One of the most compelling theories was written by Steve Hodel, who implicated his own father, a Los Angeles doctor, as the Black Dahlia murderer. Steve spent years building a case against his late father, citing evidence that the precise surgical cuts on the body pointed to someone with deep medical knowledge. Why was it never solved? Officers and detectives stated that reporters were walking all over evidence and withholding information they received from calls to their offices. At one point, reporters were inside the LAPD station freely answering phones that could have been tips for the investigation and keeping that information to themselves. The media circus essentially destroyed the investigation. In October 1949, the Los Angeles grand jury noted that 192 suspects had been investigated and dismissed, concluding the murder remained unsolved due to a lack of evidence, not police misconduct. Elizabeth Short came to Los Angeles chasing a dream. Instead, she became a ghost story, a name whispered in dark corners of Hollywood history for over 75 years. Her killer was never found. Her case was never closed. And somewhere out there, the truth about the Black Dahlia still lies buried. If you want more true crime stories like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story is even darker.